Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive.
Yeah.
You guys seem really interested in figuring out how to really get a handle on your mindset and especially self-talk.
It's a big one.
So we're going to dig into What to Say When You Talk to Yourself by Shad Helmstetter. And
Yeah, it's a classic.
yeah, we've got a lot to unpack here. So if you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to Book Summary Podcast for more deep dives like this one. All right, so
Well, Helmstetter, he starts with this idea that we're all basically programmed, by everything around us, our childhoods, all the messages we get as we grow up.
oh, okay. So this whole programming idea. I mean, it sounds a little like sci-fi, but I think I get what he's saying.
Yeah, think of your mind like a computer, right? All your experiences, the things people tell you, the stuff you see in the media, it's all input, like data going into a computer.
Right.
And that data, it creates your beliefs, your attitude, how you react to things. It literally shapes your reality.
Wow. That's kind of freaky when you think about it. Like, are we really even in control of that, or are we just running on some pre-written code?
And that's the scary part. And here's the thing. Helmstetter says that up to 77% of our programming, like those underlying thoughts that we have, are actually negative.
Whoa, 77%? Are you serious? What does that even look like in, everyday life?
Think about those automatic thoughts you have, the ones that just pop up without you even trying. How often are those thoughts, self-critical, doubtful, just plain pessimistic?
Oh, yeah, okay, I get it. Like, if I totally bomb a presentation at work, my first thought is, ugh, such an idiot. That's not exactly helpful, is it?
No, not at all. And it gets worse. Helmstetter connects this negative programming to our physical health, too. He says that up to 75% of illnesses are actually self-induced.
Oh, wow.
So our thoughts aren't just affecting our mood, they're impacting our bodies, too.
That is wild. I mean, it really makes you think twice about all those little negative things we say to ourselves, right? And I guess the big question is, what can we actually do about it? Can we reprogram ourselves?
That's where Helmstetter's 5 levels of self-talk come in. Most people, he says, get stuck at the first 2 levels.
Oh, what?
Level I is like straight up negative self-talk.
Mm-hmm.
Putting yourself down, focusing on all your flaws.
Gotcha.
Level 2 is a little better. You start to recognize you need to change,
Yeah.
but you don't actually do anything about it.
So it's like, oh, I really need to start eating healthier. And then you order pizza every night.
Pretty much.
Been there.
But level 3, that's where things get interesting. This is where you start to consciously replace those negative thoughts with positive and constructive statements.
Okay, that sounds good in theory, but how do you actually make that happen?
It's about being intentional with what you feed your mind. It's like training a muscle. You have to consistently work at it to see results. And Helmstetter gives this great example of a smoker who finally quit using level 3 self-talk.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
The smoker? I got to hear this one because everyone says quitting smoking is like the hardest thing ever.
This guy struggled at first, kept lighting up even while he was repeating those positive affirmations. But he stuck with it, and he kept feeding his mind this message that he was a non-smoker. And eventually, his actions caught up with his thoughts, and he quit for good.
That is so cool. It just shows that even if we don't believe it at first, if we keep repeating those positive messages, it can actually work, right?
The subconscious mind is always listening, even when we don't realize it. And, the book has all sorts of techniques for making this work, but one of the simplest is something he calls shower talk.
Shower talk. Okay, what's that?
It's exactly what it sounds like talking to yourself in the shower. But the idea is to use that time to start your day with positive affirmations instead of, ugh, another Monday. It's, I'm going to rock this day.
I actually do that sometimes.
Yeah.
It feels kind of silly at first, but it really does shift your mindset,
It's all about consistency. It's not a one-time thing. You have to keep those positive affirmations coming if you want to reprogram your mind.
So basically, we're rewiring our brains, changing those automatic thought patterns that are holding us back. And this is some powerful stuff. But what about those times when the negative thoughts just hit you out of nowhere? You're stuck in traffic and you feel that road rage coming on, or you're dealing with a difficult person at work. Can self-talk really help in those specific situations?
Absolutely. That's where Helmstetter introduces situational self-talk. Think of it like having this mental toolbox full of positive statements that you can pull out in those tough moments.
Oh, okay. So instead of yelling at the guy who cut me off, I could use self-talk to stay calm.
Exactly. The book has a great example about dealing with road rage. Instead of letting those angry thoughts take over, you could say to yourself, take a deep breath, it's not worth getting upset over. Or maybe this person's just having a bad day, let it go.
So it's about interrupting that negative spiral before it gets out of control.
Exactly. And the more you practice these techniques, the easier it becomes to use them when you need them.
That's really helpful, especially for someone like me who can be a little impulsive sometimes. But hey, this is a lot to take in, right? If you're just joining us, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We're just getting started. We'll be back in a minute with part 2 of our deep dive into what to say when you talk to yourself.
It's like you've got a script in your head ready to go for those times when you know you're going to lose it.
Oh, so there's like a preparation element to it too.
Yeah.
Like it's not just reacting in the moment, but actually having those positive statements ready to combat those negative thoughts. That's cool.
Yeah, and Helmstetter, he takes this whole computer analogy even further. Like he says, our appearance and our actions, they're like the computer screen. They show what's happening on the inside.
Okay, I like this. Keep going.
Then he says, our 5 senses, they're like the keyboard constantly inputting information into the system.
Right.
And our subconscious mind, that's the program disk, holding all that programming that we've picked up over the years.
So when we use self-talk, we're basically like rewriting the program on that disk, like installing a new operating system.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're swapping out those old, often negative programs with new positive ones. It's not about erasing the past, but giving yourself a better set of instructions to work with.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
It's like instead of running Windows 95, we're upgrading to something way more powerful and efficient. But it makes me wonder, where does all that initial programming come from? Like, how do we end up with so much negativity in the first place?
Well, think about it from the moment we're born. We're just soaking up messages from our parents, teachers, friends, the media. It's a constant stream of input.
Right.
And unfortunately, a lot of those messages, even if they're meant to be helpful, can end up being pretty negative.
Oh, yeah, totally. I remember being told, don't be so shy, like all the time as a kid. And looking back, I realized that probably just made me feel even more self-conscious.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Helmstetter shares this really powerful story from his own childhood about how negative programming affected him. He wanted to play in the school band, but the band director basically told him he had no musical talent and would never be able to play an instrument.
Oh, wow, that's harsh. What happened?
He believed him. And he carried that limiting belief with him for years, never even trying to play music. It really shows you how even those offhand comments, especially from people we look up to, can stick with us and shape our self-image.
It makes you realize how important it is to be mindful of the messages we send to kids.
Yeah.
Whether they're our own children, students, nieces, nephews, even just kids we meet out in the world. Words have such a huge impact, especially on young minds. If you're a parent or an educator watching this is something to really pay attention to. What messages are you sending, even unintentionally, that might be holding kids back?
Yeah, and it's not just about avoiding those negative comments. It's about actively encouraging and supporting those positive beliefs in kids, celebrating their efforts, praising their talents, helping them build that sense of, I can do this.
I love that. I think it's a good reminder for us as adults, too. We all have that inner child who might have picked up some limiting beliefs along the way. It's never too late to start challenging those beliefs and replacing them with something more empowering.
Totally. And Helmstetter has some techniques for doing just that. One that I really like is self-write.
Self-write. So this is where we actually write down our self-talk statements, right?
Yeah, you literally put pen to paper or fingers to keyboard and you craft those positive affirmations that you want to program into your mind. It's like writing a new script for your life.
I've heard of journaling, but this is like journaling with a purpose, right? Like you're not just venting, but you're actually creating the reality you want.
I love that way of putting it. And there's something about writing it down that makes it feel more concrete, more real. It's not just a fleeting thought. It's an actual commitment you're making to yourself.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got self-write, and then there's also tape talk, right? The book mentions that a few times.
Right. Tape talk is basically recording yourself saying those affirmations and then listening to them regularly. It's like having your own personal development coach in your pocket.
Back in the day, it would have been literal cassette tapes. Now you can just use your phone.
Yeah.
But the principle is the same, right? You're flooding your subconscious with all this positive input.
Exactly. And there's this fascinating story in the book about this guy who was totally skeptical about self-talk. He was given this tape to listen to, and even though he didn't really believe what he was hearing, he still experienced positive changes. It's pretty wild.
That is wild. And that's where it gets really interesting, right? Because it proves that our subconscious isn't filtering for truth. It's just absorbing whatever we feed it like a sponge.
Yeah.
So even if we're not 100% convinced by our own affirmations, at first just repeating them can plant those seeds.
Yeah, and over time, those seeds can blossom into some pretty powerful beliefs that can shape our actions and our whole reality. It's kind of like fake it till you make it.
But it's not really faking it, is it? You're actually rewiring your brain to believe those positive things about yourself.
That's the key difference. And Helmstetter really emphasizes that this takes patience. You're not going to see results overnight. It's a process.
Like anything worthwhile, it takes time and effort to see real change. But the payoff can be huge. So we've talked about the techniques, but how can we actually apply all this to our everyday lives? Like, can self-talk really help me get that promotion or improve my relationships or finally get a handle on my finances?
Absolutely. Helmstetter gets into some specific examples in the book. For instance, if you're looking to increase your income, he suggests starting with affirmations around self-worth and financial abundance.
Okay, so instead of just saying, I want to make more money, you'd say things like, I am valuable or I deserve to be financially secure.
You got it. Because a lot of times our limiting beliefs about money, they stem from these deeper issues of self-worth. We
Right.
might feel like we're not good enough or deserving enough to earn more. So by addressing those underlying beliefs, we can open ourselves up to more abundance.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And I think that applies to so many areas of life, right? If we don't believe we're worthy of love, we might sabotage our relationships. If we don't believe we're capable of success, we might hold ourselves back from going after our dreams.
Exactly. And one of the most important applications, in my opinion, is using self-talk to raise children. Helmstetter really stresses this. He says it's crucial to introduce positive self-talk early on. It's about nurturing that sense of self-belief and resilience that kids naturally have.
It's like giving them a superpower, right? Equipping them with these mental tools to face the ups and downs of life with confidence. Imagine the difference it could make if instead of hearing, you're so clumsy or you're not good at math, kids were told things like, you can achieve anything you set your mind to, or mistakes are opportunities to learn.
I wish I had heard that growing up, but it's never too late to embrace that mindset and model it for the next generation.
Absolutely. And the good news is it's never too late to start practicing self-talk ourselves.
Yeah.
So we've talked about a lot of the positive stuff, but Helmstetter also gets real about the limits of positive thinking, right? Like sometimes just trying to think happy thoughts isn't enough.
Right. He's very realistic about that. He acknowledges that we all have these ingrained negative patterns that might need a little more than just surface level affirmations to address.
So it's not a magic bullet then. What does he suggest for those deeper issues?
He says it's important to understand where those negative patterns come from. He compares it to having a weed in your garden. You can't just keep plucking off the leaves. You have to dig down and get to the root of the problem.
Okay, I like that analogy. So how do we dig down to the root of those negative thought patterns?
It might involve exploring past experiences, figuring out those limiting beliefs that we developed early on, and then actively challenging them with new, more empowering beliefs.
And that's where therapy or professional help can be really valuable, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes we need a little extra support to untangle those deep-seated issues.
Absolutely. Self-talk is a powerful tool, but it's not a replacement for professional help when it's needed.
Right. And I think it's important to remember that self-talk isn't about denying negative feelings or pretending that everything is always sunshine and rainbows. It's about learning to manage those negative thoughts in a healthier way.
Yeah, that's a crucial point.
Yeah.
It's about developing this more balanced inner dialogue where we can acknowledge those negative thoughts without letting them control us.
So instead of saying, I'm a total failure, it might be more like, okay, I messed up, but I can learn from this and do better next time. It's about reframing those thoughts in a more helpful way.
You got it. And that brings us back to internal motivation. Helmstetter talks a lot about how we can use self-talk to cultivate that inner drive that pushes us towards our goals.
Internal motivation. So that's the kind of motivation that comes from within, right? Not from external rewards or pressure, but from our own passions and purpose.
That's it. And he argues that internal motivation is way more powerful and sustainable than external motivation.
Yeah, that makes sense. If I'm only doing something because I'm afraid of getting fired, I'm probably not going to do it very well or enjoy it all. But if I'm driven by a genuine passion to learn and grow, that's a totally different story.
Totally. And self-talk can help us tap into that inner drive.
Okay, so how do we do that? How can we actually use self-talk to boost our internal motivation?
Well, it starts with identifying our values, our passions, what truly matters to us. And then we can use self-talk to align our actions with those values.
Oh, so like if I value creativity, I could use self-talk to encourage myself to try new things and take risks, even if they feel a little scary.
Perfect example.
Yeah.
And the more we practice aligning our actions with our values, the more internally motivated we become. It's less about chasing those external rewards and more about that feeling of fulfillment that comes from living in alignment with our true selves.
That is powerful. And it makes me wonder what would happen if everyone started practicing self-talk like this. If we all became more aware of our thoughts and more intentional about the messages we were feeding our minds, could we actually create a more positive and fulfilling world?
That's a beautiful question. And I think it's definitely a possibility worth exploring.
It all starts with one thought, one word, one action. And that's what to say when you talk to yourself is all about. It's about empowering ourselves to create the reality we want, both internally and externally. And hey, if you're really enjoying this deep dive, do us a favor and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We've got one more part to go. So stick around as we wrap up our exploration of this incredible book. This is like deep stuff, right? And one thing that really jumped out at me in the book was how Helmstetter talks about self-belief. And it's not about being like arrogant, you know?
Right.
It's about that deep down knowing that you are capable of like really incredible things.
It's like recognizing that potential that's already there inside you, waiting to be unleashed. And he makes a really good point that this kind of self-belief, it's not something you're necessarily born with. It's something you develop.
So it's like a muscle we have to train. The more we use it, the stronger it gets.
Exactly. And self-talk, that's where it comes in. It's like giving that muscle a good workout, you know, swapping out those old "I can't" messages with new "I can do this" affirmations.
And he gives us some pretty practical ways to do that, right? Like writing out those affirmations, recording them, and listening to them regularly.
It's about making it a habit, you know, a daily practice, almost like a mental hygiene routine. And it doesn't have to be this big, complicated thing. Even just a few minutes a day can make a huge difference.
You know, even taking a few minutes each morning to think about what I want to accomplish that day has had a big impact on me. You know, it's like I'm setting myself up for success before I even leave the house.
I love that. And Helmstetter, he really stresses that it's about progress, not perfection, you know. Even small changes in your self-talk can create a ripple effect.
So it's okay if I mess up. Sometimes, you know, fall back into those old negative thought patterns.
Of course, it's a journey, not a destination. The important thing is to catch those negative thoughts when they pop up, acknowledge them, and then gently steer your thinking back to those positive affirmations.
It's like having this little mental coach on your shoulder giving you pep talks. But what about those times when the negative messages are coming from outside, not just our own heads? Like maybe you're surrounded by negative people or you're just bombarded by bad news all the time. Can self-talk really help then?
That's a great question. And Helmstetter, he gets that we live in a pretty chaotic world. You know, there's a lot of noise out there, both literally and figuratively. So he says we need to become more aware of what we're letting into our mental space and be more choosy about what we focus on.
So it's about setting boundaries, right? Like maybe cutting back on social media or being more careful about what news I'm consuming.
Yeah, it's like taking control of your mental diet, just like you would your physical diet. You wouldn't stuff yourself with junk food all day, so why would you fill your mind with junk thoughts?
I love that analogy. And it goes back to what we were talking about before, taking responsibility for our own thoughts. You know, we can't always control what happens around us, but we can control how we react to it, how we choose to think about it.
Right. And that brings us full circle back to internal motivation. Remember, it's not about relying on external things to motivate us. It's about tapping into that inner drive that comes from aligning our actions with our values and our passions.
And Helmstetter says that self-talk is one of the most powerful tools we have for developing that kind of internal motivation.
It's like planting those seeds of intention, you know, watering them with positive affirmations, and then watching them grow into actions that are in line with our deepest desires.
And something that really stood out to me was how much he emphasizes repetition. You know, he says that even if we don't totally believe our self-talk at first, if we just keep repeating it, it can actually start to change our beliefs.
It's like creating new pathways in our brains, literally rewiring our thinking.
So even if it feels a little weird or forced at first, just keep repeating those positive affirmations and your brain will eventually catch up.
That's the idea, and there's science behind it. You know, our brains are always adapting and changing based on what we feed them. So by consistently giving ourselves those positive messages, we can literally change the structure of our brains.
It's amazing. It's like we have the power to create our own reality, not just metaphorically, but like literally on a neurological level.
And that's what's so empowering about self-talk. It's not about pretending that life is always easy. It's about equipping ourselves with the tools to deal with challenges with more resilience, optimism, and belief in ourselves.
So instead of being a victim of our circumstances, we can be the architects of our own experience.
Exactly. And I think that's a message that everyone needs to hear. If you found this conversation helpful, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the world of personal growth.
We are here to help you unlock your full potential, one book summary at a time.
And remember, the journey starts with one thought, one word, one action. What story will you tell yourself?
That is something to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into what to say when you talk to yourself. We hope you found it as inspiring as we did. Until next time, keep talking to yourself nicely.